Welcome to this informational webinar about a new certificate program now available to recognize proficiency in benchmarking building energy performance. This webinar is brought to you by the Consortium for Building Energy Innovation. The consortium is focused on generating impact in the small and medium-sized commercial buildings retrofit market. The consortium is located at the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. My name is Valerie Patrick. I'm a professional facilitator and president of Fulcrum Connection, LLC. I'll be orienting you to some of the interactive features of Adobe Connect that we will be using today. I will also be introducing today's presenters. We would like you to capture your questions as you listen to the presentation. We have muted all the participants to preserve sound quality for the webinar. So, to capture your questions, we ask that you please use the private chat feature to text your questions to Leslie Bilheimer. Leslie will be compiling your questions for the presenters to answer at the conclusion of their presentation. Leslie is a Senior Research Associate at the Consortium for Building Energy Innovation and a lecturer at Penn Design. Leslie has led market engagement and research projects on integrative design methods for architects, engineering professionals, and building construction professionals. To text your question, hover your mouse over Leslie Bilheimer's name in the attendee list, select the option Start Private Chat, type your question in the resulting text box, and hit Enter. Should you need any help with navigation during this webinar, then please raise your hand for Leslie. You can do this by clicking on the icon near the top of the screen that looks like a person raising their hand. The icon needs to turn green in order to be activated. We'll hear from Dean Evans. Dean is a registered architect, a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, and currently directs the Center for Building Knowledge at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. The Center for Building Knowledge is a 25-year-old research, development, technical assistance, and training organization whose mission is to create new knowledge to help individuals and communities make informed decisions concerning the built environment. Dean has over 30 years of experience with the built environment in both the private and public sectors. Second, we will hear from Tara Meyerdirk. Tara is the Outreach Program Manager for the Center for Building Knowledge at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. At the center, Tara worked with a team to develop the Certificate of Proficiency in Benchmarking, a national benchmarking training and credentialing program as part of the Consortium for Building Energy Innovation. Tara previously worked to develop online training for building commissioning, energy auditing, retro-commissioning, and weatherization of residential properties. Tara has worked in the commercial, institutional, and residential sectors supporting energy efficiency, research conservation, and education for sustainability projects. Now I will turn the webinar over to Dean Evans.
Val, and welcome everybody. As Val said, I'm Dean Evans. I'm an architect, and for the mostly engineers in the group, I hope you'll forgive me and listen to me for a little while I'm talking about benchmarking, Certificate of Proficiency in Benchmarking program. This program that I'm going to describe to you was a joint creation of my center, the NJIT Center for Building Knowledge, the Consortium for Building Energy Innovation, and several other sponsors who worked with us to create this certificate, mostly over last year, over 2014, and we launched in December of last year. So what is it? Where are the benchmarking audiences? How and where was it birthed? What is the curriculum, and what is the credential, and who is part of the CPB team? I'm going to go through all of those as we walk through the session today, and Tara's going to help me with some of the detailed information. So first of all, why was this whole process put together? Part of it was in response to growing legislation for benchmarking and disclosure across the US. In a second, I'll show you a slide that indicates where this kind of activity is taking place, and there's more on the way. There was also a growing public interest that we have mapped through the CBEI organization for understanding and improving building energy performance, particularly in larger buildings, which is what the benchmarking certificate is focused on: buildings, commercial buildings, and portfolios of commercial and institutional buildings. So there was a desire to create education around this task, which the EPA was already doing a bit of. But there was also an interest in creating some form of certificate of proficiency that could help municipalities and other jurisdictions who are thinking of implementing or have already implemented some form of benchmarking and disclosure ordinance to help them be able to certify that the people who were providing those services in their jurisdictions were at least minimally competent in the process of benchmarking. And as many of you, I think some of you in the audience are already familiar with benchmarking and how it works, it's extremely reliant and centered on EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the focus of the effort was to try and teach Portfolio Manager in a way that could get everybody participating up to a certain level of proficiency and then award a certificate that would recognize that proficiency. So students who complete the training can then register to take the credential exam, and for a fee, if they pass the credential exam, receive the credential, which is recognized in Portfolio Manager. The information in the coursework, which is all online, can also be taken just generally without getting the credential. And it is useful information and builds off of core information that was developed by EPA and by the team that was created to put together this entire program. And that team consisted of us, the Center for Building Knowledge, US EPA, who, as I think most of you are probably aware, manages the Energy Star Portfolio Manager program, the Cadmus Group, a group of engineering consultants who works with them, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and CBEI. And the NRDC role is interesting because they are in the process of implementing something called the 10 Cities program. I think that's correct. And it is a program to work with jurisdictions to actually encourage them and provide the means for them to create these benchmarking and disclosure programs. So the credential was created in cooperation with NRDC, in part to help them and the Institute for Market Transformation work in these cities to move ordinances forward and then have a certificate program that could ensure quality and proficiency in benchmarking. One of the drivers in this, if I'll pause for this for a second, is that there was experience that people at NRDC had with some of the early implementation of the benchmarking and disclosure programs, particularly in New York City. And one of the problems there was, as many of you may know, New York has a very aggressive program that they've just expanded. It started with requiring benchmarking and public disclosure for buildings over 50,000 square feet. I think it began with public sector and moved into the commercial sector of buildings. They've just dropped that to 25,000 square feet. So they are going to have a very massive number of buildings that have had benchmarking done to them and that are required to disclose the results. But when this launched early on, 4 probably-ish years ago, maybe a little longer, there was some rollout problems with the quality of the data that was being entered into Portfolio Manager, such that results were coming out that were obviously wrong and skewed in the wrong direction. They were either 100% perfect or they got 0 HERS ratings. There were a number of different glitches in the process. It wasn't a glitch with Portfolio Manager or the techniques of entering the data. It was how they defined the data fields and what data they put in. So one of the core missions of this project was to try and improve that data quality, the data entry quality, and how you understand what types of data you're putting in and how those data points are defined, such that Portfolio Manager could do its work. Also in the process of developing this, Portfolio Manager and the EPA were also seeing similar kinds of reports coming in from the field. And so they were interested in the project as well, and they were also upgrading Portfolio Manager at the same time. So that sort of lays the groundwork of where this came from. Partially an educational desire within CBEI to create an educational tool for national deployment, and partially an interest with EPA and NRDC in using that tool and the credential that is wrapped around it to ensure better data quality, both input and output. So this is the map I was telling you about. This indicates some of the activity that has either already occurred or is occurring in the country whether it's a commercial policy that's been adopted, a multifamily policy, public buildings benchmark. There's a variety of combinations, and there's also some single-family transparency. Oddly enough, or interestingly enough, it's sort of all over the map, pardon the pun. And New York City obviously was one of the leaders, but Philly has also begun to look at it. Washington, D.C. looked at it and is implementing a program. And you see across the country up to Seattle, San Francisco, California as a state, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a growing trend and a growing phenomenon that has been sort of one of the core drivers behind the creation of some form of credential that can indicate the proficiency of a professional in benchmarking facilities across the country. So in order to deal with this entire process, we were charged with creating the curriculum against which the credential could be measured. And we did it in terms of 4 different buckets that seemed to emerge. And I didn't mention earlier, but as part of the process with Cadmus Group and EPA and NRDC and CBI and us at the Center for Building Knowledge, we also brought in an advisory group that was coordinated by NRDC and the Institute for Market Transformation with people who were having experience in the field with it. So we brought people from New York, from Seattle, from DC, and other organizations around the country that were organized by NRDC to provide input to what was really needed from such a credential. And as I mentioned before, a lot of it focused on this data quality issue. So we decided to create a special program just for that. So in the first instance, we created a 101 course, which is essentially an introduction to Portfolio Manager per its most recent update, which was last year. It's being updated again this year. And that was pulled essentially from trainings that EPA was already doing. But we enhanced those trainings, which Tara will talk to you a little bit about what that means, and put them online and built them into a learning management system so that you could get credit for taking these courses. We then did a 201, which was also drawing on information developed by EPA, but was more advanced. It got into more of the techniques and the inner workings of Portfolio Manager in a way that 101 was more of an overview. Then we developed from scratch a third course called 301, which was essentially looking at this quality assurance, quality control issues, specifically with respect to data. So what this is trying to do is say, look, you now understand the basics of how Portfolio Manager works and the basics of how you as a user can use it. Here are the things to watch out for where we've seen people get into trouble before. And we go relatively long on those so that data issues and other concerns about how to enter information and how to capture information are dealt with in 301. 101, 201, and 301 are all streaming PowerPoint presentations with voiceover. And Tara will go into, they have a bunch of different e-enhancements, quizzes, and other things that are built into them. 401 is different. And 401 is where we wanted, it's what we called internally a practicum. And it's where we wanted to get users engaged with Portfolio Manager in a way that they could, within a controlled environment, test their skills in how to use the tool. So in 401, essentially you go into Portfolio Manager itself. We've got a sequestered portion of Portfolio Manager where people taking this course can work with it. And you're given a sample building to actually benchmark. And you walk through the process of doing it, and then at the end you enter in what your HERS score would be, your HERS rating would be, and then your test, then you see whether you did it correctly or not. And if you didn't, you're prompted on what you might have done wrong. Fairly common kinds of mistakes. We don't go really deep in 401. It's not complicated. Conceivably in the future we might try some other facility types, but we want to make sure that everybody plays with Portfolio Manager without actually mucking up EPA's Portfolio Manager database by going in and entering a non-existing building. We've controlled for that, but so that people can get a feel for not just listening and absorbing and doing some interactive exercises, but actually sitting down and working through the tool. And so that's the general overview of curriculum, and with that I'll turn it over to Tara to walk you through it in a little bit more detail.
Hi everyone. As Dean had previously mentioned, Portfolio Manager 101 is an introduction to Portfolio Manager and is a presentation that was prepared by the US EPA along with their script that they use when they do their online training and recordings. So what we did is we took the presentation and we enhanced it. This covers navigating through Portfolio Manager, adding a property and entering details about it, entering energy and water consumption data, sharing properties, and this has also been updated recently with some more shared properties information and the nitty-gritties about sharing properties, generating performance reports to assess progress, and responding to data alerts. Portfolio Manager 201 is another presentation that the EPA created, and as Dean mentioned, so we took it and we brought it into our learning management system. It's enhanced. So it's the voice-over PowerPoint that you hear with their script, but we've also done some engage interactions that we'll show you later on within the presentation and stitched in some questions to test yourself. In Portfolio Manager 201, you'll learn how to edit property information, correct or update property use details, address data quality alerts, add data using the spreadsheet upload feature, set baselines and goals on the Planning tab, analyze progress and performance with Portfolio Manager reports, and how to use the Sustainable Buildings checklist. As I just mentioned before, we have interstitched quiz questions throughout all of the modules, and this is to be able to test your knowledge as you go and to prepare you for the exam if you choose to take it. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see terms and concepts to know. This is a screen capture of what one of our interactions look like. So as you can see, it looks like a glossary, and if you were to choose to hit any of these terms, the definition would show up for you. Portfolio Manager 301, as Dina mentioned, is a brand new presentation. 301 is the purpose of 301 is to address the quality assurance, quality control issues in Portfolio Manager and looking at methods to ensure high quality data. The idea of Portfolio Manager 301 came from us talking to individuals across the country that have been involved in benchmarking ordinances, along with NRDC and our advisory group. Some individuals we spoke to were Cynthia Putnam in Seattle, and she conveyed to us that they have data quality issues out there. We looked at the San Francisco report, spoke to individuals down in Washington, D.C., Boston, along with New York City. In addition to addressing some of the data quality issues, we also go through how to access Portfolio Manager help and how to make the most out of it. Other Portfolio Manager training resources in case you need additional knowledge. Portfolio Manager terms, benchmarking tips, and common challenges. This section was developed in cooperation also with the US EPA and their training team, along with feedback that they had received about issues that individuals are having in Portfolio Manager. Energy Star building upgrade and financial resources are also highlighted in 301. Engaging the students after they've done 101, 201, 301, and building upon that knowledge will then go into Portfolio Manager 401, which is a video walkthrough of somebody entering their information into Portfolio Manager. But before you even see the video, the presentation starts with some background information, and then you're also given a test building to download within the learning management system. This test building was developed in cooperation with the U.S. EPA and Cadmus Group. It's a demonstration building. We call it the Test Office with Data Center. It was developed as a test building that's a mock of what is a more complicated office building for you to benchmark. So as test practice, you would download this building, go into Portfolio Manager, benchmark the building yourself as you would do it if you were benchmarking your own building. Then you take your Energy Star score and you put that into Portfolio Manager 401 into the quiz question. And you test your knowledge. If you've passed, great. You successfully benchmarked the building. If not, well then when you're watching the video as it's doing the walkthrough, you may want to see maybe where you made a mistake. And Christine, who's the one performing the walkthrough, does point out some issues where she may have found a couple of small snags in her own data and data quality as she's going through. So it's supposed to try to walk through in a realistic fashion. If you're interested then in taking the exam and receiving the certificate, you must complete the 4 modules first within the last 12 months. And then what you're going to do is you're going to register for the exam separately because all the training materials are free. Pay the nominal fee, which is $125. And the purpose of that is you will also receive CEUs, so it's really more a processing and maintenance fee. And then you'll be registered to take the exam. The exam is 40 questions. You will receive 4 CEUs for the exam along with the credential. Each of the credentials have a unique identification number that you can use and put into Portfolio Manager. I've just recently received some information from the US EPA about where you're supposed to put that into Portfolio Manager. I will be putting that on our website within the next week. And if you work in an area with benchmarking and disclosure compliance, then also that will help to distinguish you. As I had previously mentioned, the fee is $125. You have up to 3 chances to take the exam, and your credential lasts for 2 years. The reason for this is because every single 6 months, Portfolio Manager is updated. So after 2 years, it was decided that it would be a little bit out of date. So you can register, pay a small fee, take a new exam after watching a review course of any updates or changes that have been made in Portfolio Manager over the last 2 years. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to look at the site. So if you come to the learning management system through the site, this is what it looks like. It gives you an overview on the top, and then you can also see the courses. If you've registered and paid for the exam, you would also see that here, but I have not registered and paid for the exam, so I do not see that. The only course that I have is a training program. And as you complete each of the modules, the next module will show up and be available to you. As you see underneath 401, here is our test office with data center. And this is what it will look like to you when you open it up.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Energy Star webinar, Portfolio Manager 101, which will provide an overview of the tool. Thank you for joining us. My name is Christine Laukas, and I'm a Senior Research Architect at the Center for Building Knowledge at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. A few logistics before we get started. Throughout this presentation, you will be asked a series of questions. These questions do require a response and will be graded. Your performance so you can continue to track your building's energy performance or start using the tool if you haven't before. Learning objectives include how to navigate Portfolio Manager, how to add a single property and enter details, how to enter energy and water consumption data, how to share properties, how to generate reports and track progress, and how to respond to data requests. Energy Star is a voluntary federal.
So this is what one of the quiz questions would look like. And this is what one of the engage interactions would look like.
From this page, you'll see additional tabs that will allow you to add, view, and update more specific information. Your meters, details, goals, and design parameters. The blue box in the top right corner is a great way to see immediately how your property is doing. On this screenshot, you'll notice that no summary data is displaying. This is because no meters have been set up for this property. Next, we'll cover how to set up meters at a building. Before moving on, let's just say a few things about campuses.
So as you could see on the previous tape,
on this screenshot, you'll notice
what we have here is we have a page in Portfolio Manager, and then we have call outs for the different parts of the page. So the different interaction features may look like this or may look like something else also while you're viewing the curriculum. From the home page, you can access a candidate handbook, which will provide additional information for you and resources. Our website, which was also featured in the beginning of the presentation, and the National Building Benchmarkers Registry, which is updated as you complete the exam and after you receive the credential. We do have a registry of national benchmarkers. So your name will be on there if you have completed the exam. And Dean, I'll hand it back to you.
So thanks, everybody. That's the end of the interactive part of the presentation. I think it's fairly straightforward. When you go to the site, you'll be able to navigate around it and find what you need. And as Tara said, as you work through the portfolio 101, 201, 301, 401, each one unlocks the next one, and then you can decide whether or not to take the credential and take the test, in which case you'd be awarded the credential, assuming that you pass. It's an 80% pass rate, is that correct, to get credit? 80%,
yes.
80% of the questions correct, and then you'd be awarded the credential, which is in the form of the certificate, and also adding your name to the registry, the national registry. But in addition, for professional licensing purposes, we can award 4 continuing education units, CEUs, for successful completion of the exam. So with that, that concludes the formal part of the presentation. I'd like to turn this over now to Leslie Bilheimer, who will find out what questions you have for us from the chat. Leslie?
Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. This is Leslie. I am participating from CBI. I'm a research associate at Penn. What I'd like to do now is to go through some of the great questions that have been coming in while Dean and Tara have been presenting. Before I dive into the first question, what I want to mention is that for those of you who lost the chat window, what you'll need to do is hover your mouse up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and look for a button that has 4 inward-facing arrows, and push that, and you should be able to regain the original screen with the participant lists, the host lists, and the chat windows over on the left-hand side of your screen. So that's just a note. And for those of you who joined a couple minutes late, if there were any questions that came up during Dean and Tara's presentations, please just send me a private chat. And in order to do that, you can hover over my name in the host list and right-click and send me a private chat. And we'll record those and work through them. So now I'm going to go over to the list of questions that we've been gathering. The first one is how much time does it take to finish each module?
It roughly takes about 45 minutes to an hour to complete each module. So we say that it probably takes about 4 hours to complete the full track, hence you'll be able to receive the 4 CEUs upon finishing.
Okay, thanks, Tara. The second question is how much time commitment would you estimate would be needed to get the credential?
4 hours.
Okay, excellent. And another question that came in is there any work outside of the learning modules, like homework for the course?
No, not really. There's the printoutable handbook that you can take and look at to help sort of guide you through the process. And then there's, I guess there's a downloadable PDF that goes with Module 401 that I guess you can look at before entering the data that comes with it. But no, not really. There's no homework or there's no manual that goes with it. It's all online.
Right. I would say that the only thing that you might consider homework is the review of the test building for 401 and entering it. That's the only thing that's outside where you would leave the module to do so. But we still estimate that the time is about 4 hours in total.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Another question is, how long after taking and passing the exam will we receive the actual certificate and registry into the National Building Benchmarkers Registry?
Within a week or two, once a week, every single Monday, we run the report of who's passed, and the registry is updated every single Monday, and the names are sent through our continuing professional education department for the credential to be printed and sent in the mail.
Okay, great. Couple more questions. Is there any required interaction with real buildings for the credential?
No, not at this point. This is a baseline credential, so it's building off of, as I said earlier, sort of the base of experience that EPA has had, updated with 301, and then pushing through the practicum, which is based on, I mean, the data center, the office with the data center is not an uncomplicated building, but it's not wildly sophisticated either. One of the things, so the answer to that is no. It's all internal to the system, and you're not out actually benchmarking your own building. It'd be a fun thing for us to be able to do, but it just gets too complicated at the national scale. One of the things we do want to add to this process, and we intend to over the next year or so, is some, I guess what we might call electives within the curriculum, where we look at, we go a little bit deeper on specific building types. And we've had suggestions from people to look at data centers as a whole, potentially multifamily, a bunch of other things. If we added those would be mostly at least right now, the way we're thinking of them is that they would be mostly educational and not part of the credentialing process, but they would be part of the curriculum if you wanted to learn more about a specific facility that you might be interested in benchmarking. But no, you're not required to go out and do anything in the field in order to earn the credential.
I believe that part of, I guess, the idea and concept behind the way it was created is that there are many people who benchmark a building who have never even been to the building. They receive the data and information about the building itself. So this was set up as if somebody receives the data and details and information all about the building, anything that you would really need to benchmark the building, you have on the test office with data center document to effectively benchmark the building. So in a way, you are benchmarking a building yourself, but you just have not visited that building. There's a play address though. You can go visit if you want.
Okay, great. Thanks for that answer. So one more question. Can you clarify again what we pay for as participants?
The fee for taking the exam and then earning the credential, assuming that you pass, is $125. The coursework can be taken for free, but if you want to take the test and get the credential and get entered into the benchmarker database, there's a fee of $125.
And you also receive the 4 CEUs as part of that. And the fee really covers the processing of the CEUs, the maintaining of the database and site, etc.
Right.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dean and Tara, for answering those questions. I'm going to hand it back to you and Val to wrap up the webinar.
Okay, before I get started, I wanted to find out if Tara or Dean had any other comments they wanted to add.
No, I don't think so. I think the questions were great, and we wish everybody luck.